Hello everyone, welcome to the solution tutorial of Week 2 Challenge Shipment Processing as part of BotGame Season 4. I hope you enjoyed solving this challenge and had a chance to share your results on social media. If yes, that's awesome. If not, it's still okay. I'm going to show you how to solve this challenge. I'm going to show you one of the approaches we had taken to solve this challenge, and there are many more ways in which you can also approach it. Let's get to the objective of the challenge. A manufacturing company, Genexit International, has received a list of orders and wants to ship them with a tracking number. For each PO numbers listed on the challenge page, look up the corresponding order information in the ProcureEase application and generate the tracking number from the ShipGlobe application. Then, identify the shipping type based on the rules mentioned in the challenge page and submit the form to see your score. Now, let's look at the prerequisites. If you're using your own control room, then you can download the OpenAI Generative AI package from the bot store and import it to your CR. If you are using a community edition, then it is already preloaded. Let's take a look at the rules. Determine the shipping type based on the following conditions. For an order value of $300 or lesser, select ground shipping. If the order is $600 or above, then select Express Plus. If not, select Express as the preferred option. The second rule is that you have to use generative AI to get the full state name for the state code mentioned in the ProcureEase application for each of these orders. Do not pre-cache the state list in a local file and reference it. Let's take a look at a couple of tips and tricks. ChatGPT or any other generative AI of your choice can respond in different formats. So be specific in what you are asking for and also the format in which you want the response. You have the option to ask ChatGPT for the entire list of state names for all the states in the US, or you can ask ChatGPT to give you the state name for each of the state codes associated with the PO number. The choice is yours. Let's take a look at the application page to see the entire workflow. Here is the Shipment Processing challenge page. As you can see here, it has a list of PO numbers. Take up PO numbers one by one and then go to the ProcureEase application, look for the corresponding order details, extract all these details, and then we have to enter this data into the ShipGlobe Tracking Number application. These are all the fields you will have to fill out. There are two fields which you will have to specifically look at. The first one is the state. So the ProcureEase application has the state code, whereas the ShipGlobe application is expecting the state name. And then you also have to calculate the shipping type based on the rules which we discussed earlier. Once you enter all the details into this ShipGlobe application, you can click on generate to get you the tracking number. Once you have the correct tracking number, go back to the challenge page, enter the tracking number, select the shipping type for all the PO numbers, and once you do it, click on the submit to see your score. Now, let's switch to the control room to build an automation to solve this challenge. I've logged into the community edition, and as you can see here under bots, I've created a folder called BotGame Season 4, under which I have another folder called Shipment Processing Challenge Solution. I'm going to create an automation by clicking on this Create a Task Bot button. I'll give it a name, Shipment Processing Solution. Click on Create and Edit. Before I create the entire solution, I always start with the step package. That will help me create a skeleton for my entire workflow. Let's start adding the steps. I'll add a couple of them to start with. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. First one, I'll call it as setting up variables. Second one as launching the challenge page. And other applications which we need to work with. and next looping through all the PO numbers. Next is read the information from the ProcureEase application. Next step, get the state name using OpenAI Generative AI package. Next step is to identify the shipping type. I'll call it as identify the shipping type. Next step is to generate the tracking number. Generate tracking number. Once we have the tracking number, we have to start entering the data back to the challenge page. I'll call this as enter the data in the challenge page. And the last step is to click on the submit button. I'm going to drag and drop one more step and call this as submit to see your score. And then when we are looping through all these PO numbers, these are all the sub steps. So what I'll do is I'll select these 4 steps and make them as the sub steps for this looping through all PO numbers. I'll do the same for this step which says enter the data in the challenge page as well. Let's start filling each of these blocks. First one, to start with setting up the variable, I'll create a variable to store the challenge URL. I'll call this as challenge URL. Click on create. Next, I want to store my API key. I'll call it as API key. I will enter the value here and then click on create. Now I'll add an assign action to enter the challenge URL to the variable which we just created. So under the string, I'm going to drag and drop this assign. The destination variable, I'll select it as challenge URL, and let's get the application URL here. I'll copy this and come back here and paste it. So now we have assigned the variable challenge URL with the challenge page link. So now let's launch the challenge page. For that, I'm going to look for an action called browser open. I'll drag and drop this action in the second step, that is under launching challenge page and other applications. I'm going to select it as new window, select the browser as Google Chrome. The link to open is the challenge URL which we have created earlier. Once we do this, we'll also use 2 more open actions to launch the other pages. I'll drag and drop 2 of these actions here. Go to the first one. I'll say new tab and then choose a browser tab. That's last use browser tab. And I can just go back here and I'll copy this lookup application URL and I can enter it here. You can also go to the challenge page and then click on these pages from there as well. And for the next one, I'll do the same. I'll select the new tab and I'll select the last use browser tab and get the ShipGlobe application URL from here. I'll add it here. Click on save. Now I have all these 3 challenge pages open. Next step is to get all the PO numbers listed in the challenge page. For that, I'll use a loop action so that I can loop through each of these PO numbers. I'll drag and drop this below the step that says looping through all the PO numbers. I'll say loop for n times, and I know there are 6 PO numbers, so I'm going to add this as 6 times, and then let me assign the current value to a variable. It's going to loop through for 6 times, and each time it enters the iteration, it will store the number in this variable called nCounter. That means when it is entering this loop for the first time, the value of nCounter will be 1, and for the subsequent iterations, it will increment by 1. So I'll click on create and select. Next is to capture the PO number. For that, I'm going to use the recorder capture action. I'm going to drag and drop this here and click on browser. I'll refresh so that I get the list of all the applications which are available. And then I will select the shipment processing challenge and click on capture object. Now let me scroll up and identify this PO field. The action which I want to take on this field is like I want to get the property. I want to get the text, that is the PO number. Let's see which property has that value PO number. Let me expand the object properties, scroll down to see where is that PO number available. I can see that it is available in HTML value. So I will select this particular attribute, that is HTML value. The next step is to ensure this action has a dynamic XPath so that it is able to identify the correct field whenever it gets into the new iteration. So let's take a look at the DOM XPath here. We have identified the first PO number. I'll copy this XPath into a notepad. Now let's identify the second PO number so that we can see the variation in the XPath. I'm going to identify this second one. Now let's see how the XPath looks like. I'll copy this back to the notepad. And as you can notice, this is the only number that is changing. So what we will do is like we will replace this static value with the variable which we have created earlier, that is encounter, as that value increments for each iteration. So what I'll do is like I'll remove this number 2 here, click on F2 and then select the encounter variable. Because the XPath only accepts string, I'll place a dot and then type out toString. That way the variable encounter will be converted to a string, and that works well with the XPath. However, I notice here that there are other static values which I also want to remove. So I'll expand this object properties, remove anything that is static like HTML ID. I don't want the path. Yeah, rest of them are good. And now let's store the output into a variable. I'll give it a name called SPO number and click on create and select. Now we have the PO number from the challenge page. Let's go to the ProcureEase application to identify the corresponding order details. For that, again, I'm going to use a recorder capture action. Click on browser and then select the application. This time I'm going to select the purchase order lookup application. Click on capture object. In the ProcureEase application, let's identify this search field. This is where I want to type in the PO number. I want to set the text and I want to enter the PO number, for which I'll click on F2 and select SPO number. So once I have this PO number entered, let's look at the application response. Let me just copy this PO number here, go back and enter the PO number here. Now the application shows me the corresponding order details for this PO number. Let's start reading through all the information in this table. I'll go back here. Let's add a next step, recorder capture, to identify that HTML table. I'm going to drag and drop this recorder capture action. Select the browser, that is our purchase order lookup application. I'll click on capture object and then I'll identify this entire table. Now we want to read through the corresponding order information field by field. For that, I'm going to select the action as get cell text by index. So let's look at the index here. The first row is the headers and the second row is the information which we want to extract. So the row number is 1 and 2. The 1 is the header and 2 is the information we need. And then these are all the columns. The PO number is the column 1, buyer org is the column 2. So let's start with row 2 and then column 1. I'll add this row as 2 and then column as 1. And I'm going to store this information into a new variable. So I'm going to get the PO number here, but this time the PO number is from the ProcureEase application. So I'll give it a name as SPO number from lookup, because I'm getting this from the lookup application. Now, I want to ensure that the PO number shown up on the lookup application matches with the PO number which I have entered into the search number. That way, I want to proceed only if these numbers are matching. Otherwise, I want to display a message saying that the PO number is not found. So to compare those values, I'm going to use a if action. I look for this if action and drag and drop it here. And then I look for the string condition. And the source value, I'll select it as SPO number. If this is equal to the target value as SPO number from lookup, this is when I would want to continue extracting all the other values. I'll unselect the match case here. I'll click on save. And now, if this is true, I'll start extracting all the information. Let's look at number of fields which we have to extract now. We have already extracted the PO number. So now we want the buyer number. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 fields to be extracted. We don't need this order date field since that's not one of the fields available in the ShipGlobe application. So we need 7 values to be extracted from this page. So what I'll do is I'll copy this recorder capture action and then paste this within the if statement, and we want 7 of these. I already have 1. I'm going to copy paste 6 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now let's start configuring each of these fields. Next one is I'll get the row as 2 and the column as 2 as well. And this time it will be the buyer org. So I'm going to change the variable name here, create a new variable, and I'll give it a name as buyer org. Click on create and select. Next one is we'll move to the next column, that is column number 3, and let's see what is the name. We will get it as buyer address. So I'll add a new variable called s buyer address. Let's move on to the next column, column 4, and corresponding to that is the city. So let's give it a variable name that says s city. Next, we will move on to the next column, that is column 5, and column 5 will have information that is the state. In this case, it is the state code. So I'm going to create a new variable called s state code, because we will also need a new variable that we will call it as state name in the future. Moving on to the next one, I'll add this as column 6. Let's take a look at what's there in the column 6. It is the zip number. So I'll come back here and call this as szip. Next one is column 8. Because we don't need this order date, let's move on to the next column, that is order total. In the column 8, I'm going to update this column number as 8 and then the variable name as s order total. Let me fix the spelling here, s order total. And the last one is the 9th column, that is the customer contact. I'm going to add it as s customer contact. Click on create and select. Now we have extracted all the required fields from the HTML table. The next step is to get the state name for the state code. For example, here the state code is TN, that is Tennessee. Now we want the corresponding state name, that is Tennessee. So let's see how we can use the OpenAI Generative AI package to get this state name. I'm going to look for an action called OpenAI, and then this time I'm going to use GPT-3 package. I'm going to drag and drop this into the step get the state name. I'll select it as insecure string. However, in your production use cases, please ensure you store these keys safely in the credential vault. For demonstration purpose, I'm just going to use the variable which I have created, that is SAPI key. And then The model by default, it is Text DaVinci 003 model. Feel free to explore all other models to see whichever gives you a much faster response. You can always try that. And let's take a look at the prompt. So here is the prompt which I'm going to use. Give me the full state name in US for the state code, and then we will pass the variable that is the S state code and ask for a response in the JSON format. I'm also going to give it a sample on what is the kind of response I'm looking for. That is, I need the state code to be entered. That is what the value which I'm going to feed it, and then I will look for the value that is the state name corresponding to this key called state name. And I'll also add a sentence. Do not wrap anything around the JSON, because I've seen sometimes when the ChatGPT responds, it would have added some text around the JSON, which will make it harder to parse this JSON. So I'm going to copy this entire text here and add it in the prompt. And once I get the response, I want to store it into a variable. I'll click on create a variable and give it a name like SGPT response. Click on create and select. Now, once I have this response, I want to parse it to get the state name. For that, I'm going to use the JSON package and then add start session. That's the first step. Next step is to get the node value. I'll add this here. And then third is the end session. Now, in the start session, I have to add this text that is stored in the variable, that is the SGPT response. And then in the node value, we have to mention what is the node key which we are looking for. We are looking for this node key so that we will get the state name. That will be the value here. So I'm going to add this as node key as state name, and then I'll save it as S state name. Click on create and select, and then just end this session. So here we have added the logic in such a way that it's going to invoke ChatGPT for each of these iterations. Now we will have the value which has come back from the ChatGPT, and next we have to identify the shipping type. As we already know, there are a couple of rules based on which we have to identify. For that, I'm going to use the if action. I'll drag and drop this if action into this identify the shipping type. I'll also add the else if statement here, and next is else. So first, we want to check for the order value. If the order value is equal to or less than 300, that's when we want to select the shipping type as ground shipping. So I'll give the condition as number condition. In the source value, I'm going to select the order total. Since order total is actually saved as a string, I'm going to type a dollar symbol here and then type S order total. And you can notice that it is giving me the variable name that is S order total. Because this is a number comparison, I have to convert the string to a number. So I'll place a dot and then type it as to number. This way, this value is getting converted to a number. And then in the operator, I want to select less than or equal to, and the target value is 300. Let's take a quick look at the order value, which we will get it here. As you can see here, along with the number 37.80, it also has a dollar symbol. We don't want this dollar symbol during the calculations. So let's remove this dollar symbol from the order total. For that, I'm going to use an action called substring and drag and drop it above the if step, and then the source string, I'll select it as S order total. Click on S insert and then start from 2. That means the first letter will be ignored. And then I will not enter anything into the length because I need that entire string, whatever is the value. And then I assign the value back to S order total. This way that dollar symbol is now removed and it will only have the numeric value. This way it will be easier to check with the value 300 to identify if it is more or less. If it is lesser, then we will identify the shipping type as ground shipping. So I will create a new variable called shipping type. I'll call it as yes shipping type and click on create. Next, let's assign this value to a variable. I'll use this assign action under the string, drag and drop it here. I'll say the value which I want to assign is ground shipping with a space in between. So that is all coming from this tracking number application. If you select this shipping type here, we have three values: ground shipping, express and express plus. So that's what we are entering here. Whenever the order value is lesser than 300 or equal to 300, we want the automation to select the shipping type as ground shipping. And then the variable which we have already created is yes shipping type. So now the value of ground shipping will be assigned to this variable yes shipping type. Also, along with using this here, we will need to select the shipping type on the challenge page as well. So as you can see here, you come back, once you get the tracking number, you will add it here, and then you have to select the shipping type here. So here it's actually a radio button instead of the drop down that is there on the tracking number generator application. We want to identify the XPath for these radio buttons so that we will also be able to identify this when it comes to entering this application and selecting the values. So let's take a look at the DOM-X path for these radio buttons. I'll use a recorder capture action. I'll just drag and drop it here. I'll go to the browser. I'll identify the shipment processing challenge, click on capture object, and then I'll identify this radio button ground shipping. Let's take a look at the DOM-X path. I'm going to copy it from here and add it to the notepad. Now let's check the DOM-X path for the other objects as well so that we can identify the pattern. I'll click on recapture object. Instead of selecting the express for the first iteration, let me select the express for second iteration to see the variation in the DOM-X path. Now I'll copy this DOM-X path here and paste it into the notepad. As we can see, there are two values different. Here is one div and then here there is one more div that is different. Let's do one more capture. I'll click on recapture object. This time we will scroll down all the way to the 6th PO number and identify this express plus radio button. Now I'll copy this DOM-X path and go back here and add it to the notepad. Here we will notice 1, 2 and 6. That means for each iteration this value will increment. However, these values, it will always remain as 1, 2 or 3. 1 is corresponding to the ground shipping, 2 is corresponding to the express and 3 is corresponding to the express plus. So now what we will do is let's create a number variable and store these values corresponding to each shipping type. I'm going to the variable section and create a new variable. This time I'll call it as n shipping type counter and select the type as number. Then click on create. Now we will also assign the values for each of these shipping types. The first one is we have identified the shipping type as ground shipping since the order value will be less than 300. In this case, I'll use actions called assign, but it will be under the number package because I want to check the number assignment here. I'll drag and drop this here and then I'll give the value as 1 and store it to n shipping type counter. So whenever it is ground shipping, then it will contain the value as 1 in this counter. And now we want to do this for the other if else actions as well. Let's go to the second one, that is if else. Again, we'll look for the number condition here. I'll select the number condition. The source value is the order total. And let's convert this to a number. And this time the operator is greater than equal to, and the target value is 600. If the order total is greater than 600, then the shipping type is going to be Express Plus. So what I'll do is I'll copy these two actions, that is string assign and the number assign, and paste it into this, and I'll also paste it to the last section. So let's configure these values in the else condition when the order value is greater than or equal to 600. So whenever it is more than 600, it will be Express Plus. And the number assignment, we have to assign the number as 3 because that's what we have seen when we identified the DOMEX path. And the last if section, this will be Express. This will be any value which is between 300 and 600, and the number assignment will be 2. Now we have all the values identified based on whatever is the order total. Now let's enter the information which we have extracted from the ProcureEase application to the ShipGlobe Tracking Number Generator application. For that, we will use recorder capture action. Since I've already used this recorder capture action here and which we don't need it there, I'm going to just drag and drop it here and then click on the browser, identify this tracking number generator application, click on recapture object, and I'll identify the PO number field. The action to take on this object is to set text, and I want to enter the PO number. I'll look for SPO. We can either select the SPO number or SPO number from lookup. I'll just select the SPO number from lookup and click on Yes, Insert. So now we want to do this for all the remaining fields. Let's look at how many fields are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Now we need to enter the data into 8 more fields. For that, I'm going to capture this recorder capture action and paste it 8 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So let's start configuring each of these values. Let's go to the second one. We are looking for the buyer org. Identify this buyer org field, and then the value which we want to enter is the sBuyerOrg variable. So I look for sBuyerOrg, click on SInsert. Similarly, let's start configuring the values for each of the other fields. Click on recapture object, sBuyerAddress, and I'll add this variable here, that is sBuyerAddress. Click on SInsert. Next, click on recapture object. This time it is the city field. I'll enter the value as sCity. That's the variable which will contain the value for the city. Next, recapture object. Now we have to select the state. Click on this drop down, and then the action we want to take is select item by text, because we already have the text in the response back from the ChatGPT. I'll click on F2 in the assign value and then select the state name. Click on SInsert. Next one, click on recapture object. We'll select the field zip. Here I'll select the variable called szip. Click on SInsert. Moving on to the next field, click on recapture object. Now we will identify this order total and add the variable that contains the order total, order total. Click on SInsert. And 2 more fields which we want to enter the data into. Click on recapture object, and now the customer contact, and I'll select the variable here. Click on F2 and customer contact, and now on to the last one, that is the shipping type. I'll click on recapture object and identify this shipping type. The action which I want to take is select item by text, and the text is in the variable, which I'll select by clicking on the F2 and then selecting the S shipping type. So now we have entered all the details into these fields. Now it's time to click on this generate button to get the tracking number. So I'll copy paste one more recorder capture action and click on recapture object and identify this generate button, and the action which I want to perform is click. Now I'll just click on this generate button and it is going to generate a tracking number. Since I've not entered any of the values, it is going to give me zeros for now, and that's okay. But we want to just read the tracking number from here and then click on OK so that we can continue to the next iteration. So I need two more actions, that is one to read the tracking number and the second one to click on the OK button. So I'll copy paste two more recorder capture actions. Let's start configuring these. Click on recapture object and I'll select this tracking number field. And the action I want to perform is get property. Let's see which property has the tracking number here. I'll expand the object properties and I'll look for the zeros here. It is available in the attribute called HTML value. So now I'm going to select the HTML value from the list here, and I'll store it into a variable called S tracking number. Click on create and select. And next step is to click on the OK button. After we capture the tracking number, I'll click on recapture object and identify this OK button here. The action which I just want to perform is click. So now let's get back to this application page. I'll click on OK and now it is ready for the next iteration. But since we would have entered the values for first order, we want to click on the reset before we start entering the data for the next order. So let's add one more recorder capture action and identify this reset button to be clicked. I'll select this and copy paste. Now recapture the object and identify this reset button. And the action I want to take is click. And now I'll save this automation. So now we would have captured the tracking number and also have the application ready to enter the next set of details. Once we have this tracking number, we can go back to the challenge page and start entering the details here. So for this PO number, we want to enter the tracking number and we also want to select this shipping type. So I'll need two more recorder capture actions. I'm just going to copy this from here and paste it into the step, enter the data in the challenge page. Let's configure these actions. Select the first one. I'll identify the browser since it is different. I will select the application as Shipment Processing challenge. Click on recapture object and I will identify this tracking number. And the action I want to perform is set the text and the variable is S tracking number. Let me look for that variable from here and I'll select this tracking number. I'll click on save. Here we want to enter the data into each of the tracking numbers here. Since the DOMX path will be different, let's also identify the DOMX path and fix it so that when we run it in a loop, it will be able to identify the correct field and then enter the data. So let's get the DOMX path for the first field which we have already identified. I'll copy this DOMX path here to my notepad. So here is the DOMX path. Now let's get the DOMX path for the next tracking number. That is like the first tracking number is connected to the first PO number and the second tracking number is connected to the second PO number. So let's identify the DOMX path for the tracking number connected to the second PO number now. I'll go back to my automation, click on recapture object and identify this second tracking number. I'll copy the DOMX path here to see the variation. We can notice that here is the only value that is getting changed. So we can use that variable which we created initially, that is nCounter, to replace this static number. Let's do that here. Just expand this for now. I'll remove this number 2 and then select the nCounter variable here. And since it accepts only strings, I'll place a dot and select as toString. And since we have made this DOMX path as dynamic, we want to ensure there are no other static values. So I'm going to remove this HTML ID and the path. Okay, now we should be good. The last step is to identify the shipping type. So I'll go here and identify the browser. That is the Shipment Processing challenge. I'll click on Recapture Object and identify this first ground shipping radio button. The action I want to do is select, and let's get the DOMX path for this. Let's paste the DOMX path into this notepad, and as we have already done this exercise here to identify the DOMX path for the shipping type, there are two values which would change. That is, this div number changes and here is another div number change. So these two values we have to update it with the variables which we have created. So what we'll do is we'll replace this first one with a variable called nCounter. So that is the number of iteration it is currently in. And then this 1, 2 or 3 is based on the shipping type counter. So let's change these values here. It's going to remove this 1 here and click on F2 and then select the nCounter here. And because it only accepts string, I'll place a dot and toString. And then we also want to change the last but 1. That is this div 1. I'll replace it with a n shipping type counter. Similarly, convert it to a string. So I'll place a dot and toString. And this will take care of it. We also want to ensure we remove all the other static values. So I'm going to remove this HTML ID, the path, and the HTML name. Click on save. So now it is all set. So this should take care of entering the tracking number and selecting the radio button. So let's collapse all these steps and then we will add one more recorder capture action to click on the submit button. I'll just copy this recorder capture action and put it under the submit to see your score. Let me collapse all these fields. The last step is to click on the submit button. Here you have to ensure that the action to click on the submit button is not within the loop, because we don't want to click on the submit button for each iteration. Instead, we want to fill out details for all the iterations and then click on submit at the end. So let's configure the properties for the submit button. I'll click on window, select the browser, that is our challenge page. I'll click on recapture object. I'll scroll down and identify this submit button, and the action I want to perform is a click. So now that we have completed building this entire automation, let's double check all the steps to ensure we are looping through properly and also clicking just once at the submit button. I'll just expand on this looping through all PO numbers, and here we are looping. I just noticed that these steps are supposed to be part of the loop as well. So what I'll do is I'll collapse these steps and then select all of these values and move it within the loop. So this way, if I just collapse this loop now, I can see that all the steps are within that loop itself. So for each iteration, it's going to capture the value and then read the information from the ProcureEase application, generate the tracking number, and add the details into the challenge page. Now let's run this automation to see the results. I'll click on run. We will give it some time for it to launch 3 different applications and also work on all the iterations. Since it's going to take a while, I'm going to fast forward this clip and then we will wait for the execution to complete, and once it's done, I'll be back and we will continue from there. As you can see here, the automation execution is complete and the accuracy is 100%. Now that we have completed the execution, let's take a look at how to download the certificate. I'll click on this copy button and then click on this arrow mark and paste this unique ID which I have received. I'll enter my name here. Enter your email ID. And then I'll enter my company name and then click on download. Now you will notice that the certificate is downloaded, and once you open, you can see that you have got a certificate for solving this awesome challenge. Now you can pat on your back to say that you have solved an awesome challenge. Let's get back to the slides. In this tutorial, we have seen one way of solving this challenge. Let's talk about a couple of alternative approaches. The first one is to explore different models in ChatGPT, and even if you have access to other LLMs, you can also try that, because this is very simple to get the state names from the state codes. Also, instead of asking ChatGPT for state name for each state code, you can also ask for the entire list. And once you get the response in JSON, you can also convert it to dictionary using a package called JSON parser package that's available in the bot store. That can help you save some time as well. Another option is to extract all PO numbers at once from the challenge page instead of getting each PO number at once, so that you can avoid the time taken to switch between different applications. Last but not the least, you can try out web automation package available on bot store if you are looking to solve this at a much faster speed. But please make sure the goal is always to build the logic in such a way that it's simple to understand and maintain, and you're just not focusing on the speed. Speed is important, but the reliability is much more important whenever you're deploying any automations to production. Let's take a look at one of the issues you may face while running this challenge. You may get this 429 error from OpenAI that says you have invoked ChatGPT with too many requests in a very short span of time. To avoid this, you can add some static delays, or you can get the entire list of state names at once so that you will not encounter this issue. Now that you have completed solving this challenge and also downloaded the certificate, let's take a look at the social side. If you have not yet registered for Bot Game Season 4, please do register, because that's mandatory to be eligible to get some swag. Once you complete the challenge, share a screenshot of your results on social media along with the hashtag BotGames. Our social team and our developer evangelism team is always looking for your posts. We'll be happy to like, comment and share your posts as well. Along with that, tag 3 of your automation developer friends and challenge them to solve this exercise. This way, you will be eligible to get some cool Bot Game Season 4 swag. I hope this tutorial was useful for you. We will be back with the third and the last challenge on next Monday. Till then, happy learning. This is Arjun S Meda signing off, and go be great.